Flashback.
I don't know anybody, including Larry Summers, who's a friend of mine, who's worried about inflation. Talking inflation. The overwhelming consensus is going to pop up a little bit and then go back down. No one's talking about this great,
Many months later.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one.
I want every American to know that I'm taking inflation very seriously, and it's my top domestic priority.
Wait a minute.
I know the families all across America are hurting because of inflation.
Who are you?
There's nobody suggesting there's unchecked inflation on the way.
Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. I have never seen such a dishonest administration in my entire life. Now, I've started many videos saying this exact thing, covering similar topics, and well, the reason I keep saying it is because it's true. This administration is something else. It's something different, another breed of disconnected, out of touch, tone-deaf elitist politicians who just don't care. They don't care until they don't have a choice but to care. And that is the perfect way to describe Joe Biden and his lackeys, his Democrat goons in Washington. They kick the can down the road, they kick it, it's not a problem until it seriously becomes a problem for them and their re-electability. Inflation has been in crisis mode for a seriously long time. Everybody I talk to has been taking it seriously for a very long time and never viewed it as transitory. People were expecting it to get worse and worse and worse. And then especially with the destabilization of Eastern Europe, you would be a fool to think that inflation is just magically going to get better. But while the American people have been taking it seriously from the start, and look, not just the American people, I mean people in the West in general, it's happening to so many different countries, one very important group has refused to take this issue seriously this entire time. And that's the President of the United States and his administration. They have largely ignored, dismissed, laughed off, or blamed others for inflation, and then all of a sudden, a year after inflation started to ramp up, now all of a sudden, inflation becomes one of Joe Biden's top priorities. I have a couple words I'd like to say here, but I'll refrain myself. Let me just say Joe Biden is one of the most dishonest politicians of all time. He doesn't care, and let's debunk and criticize some of the ridiculous things that are coming out of his face hole these days. This guy's dishonesty never ceases to amaze. We got some stuff to get into, but of course, before we get into any of it, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share the video as much as possible. We are still shadow banned by the YouTube algorithm, hidden from non-subscribed viewers. And with that out of the way, let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so here's Joe Biden during his tackling inflation and lowering cost event, where not only is Joe Biden totally incoherent, and I don't even understand half of the crap that he says, but he's also a completely disingenuous liar. Take a look.
Now, as I said when I came to what Congress and the president can do to fight inflation, Americans have two potential paths forward. The first is my plan, the Democratic plan. Plan put forward by congressional Republicans is a second alternative. Here's how each of us would tackle inflation. My plan is to lower everyday costs for hardworking Americans, and lower the deficit by asking large corporations and the wealthiest Americans to not engage in price gouging and to pay their fair share in taxes. The Republican plan is to increase taxes on the middle-class families, let billionaires and large companies off the hook as they raise prices and reap profits at record amounts. And it's really that simple.
Now, of course, a lot of it is totally incoherent. I mean, it's total gibberish. But let's try to unpack the points that he did somewhat successfully make. First off, he's saying that Americans have two options, either my plan and the Democrat plan, or the Republican plan, and he then goes on to totally misrepresent and trash the Republican plan, essentially trying to make the point that his plan is so much better. And I'm assuming they're probably going to roll Kamala Harris out with a new campaign to tackle the root causes of inflation, which of course the root cause being these Democrats, and their insane fiscal policy, but a year after not taking inflation seriously, he's now asking the American public to trust the Democrats with tackling this economic issue, when we already know the polling data suggests that Americans trust Republicans more than Democrats to deal with crime and the economy, as nearly 7 in 10 voters disapprove of how Biden is handling inflation, new poll suggests. 70% of the country doesn't want Joe Biden to handle inflation and doesn't trust him or his administration or congressional Democrats to deal with inflation, probably because they are the root cause of inflation. Inflation is not Vladimir Putin's fault. Inflation is a direct result of bad monetary policy and the endless printing of cash and increasing money supply, which is exactly what Democrats do. Democrats are experts at this. And now Joe's proposed solution is also completely idiotic. He's going to ask companies to reduce their prices. What planet are you living on? Oh, excuse me, Coca-Cola and Coca-Cola shareholders. Can you guys please reduce the prices of all of your beverages? Are you out of your damn mind? In what universe is that a plan? That's a pipe dream. That's idiotic, incompetent, unrealistic, whatever words you want to use. It just doesn't make any sense. And it's again not the root cause of inflation. But Democrats want you to believe that inflation is actually just corporate greed and price gouging, instead of the literal doubling of the money supply over the last couple of years. Trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars being printed, totally unaccounted for, being put into the banking system, in many cases being loaned out to the most wealthy Americans in the investor class, to run rampant on the markets, and especially the housing market, while the middle class and lower class get poorer. Not to mention Joe Biden's idiotic plan to reduce the deficit and to lower costs for Americans is to increase taxes on companies and major corporations, increasing the cost of doing business, which is essentially more inflationary pressure on American citizens and basic consumers. And so the reality is, Joe Biden doesn't have a plan for inflation. Joe Biden is rehashing old, nonsense Democrat talking points and claiming that that's going to somehow fix inflation. It's completely idiotic. The reality is Joe Biden doesn't have a plan, just like he accidentally admitted here.
You know, we have no plan. They have no plan to bring down energy prices today.
Whether a gaffe or Freudian slip, I don't know, you tell me. But here's the thing. Even if that was true, even if Republicans had no plan to reduce inflation, that's actually a good way to reduce inflation. No plan is exactly how you keep the economy stable, by allowing economic forces to work themselves out naturally, instead of all this economic stimulus and manipulation that we're seeing from the Fed and big banks. And of course, Washington. I mean, these people literally think that you're stupid. Case in point. Take a look at what Jen Psaki said just the other day.
Of inflation data is a result of energy prices. A large part of that is the result, and Chairman Powell has spoken to this, and Secretary Yellen has also spoken to this, as a result of President Putin's invasion of Ukraine and the impact on the global energy markets. Those are all steps and impacts that I don't think anyone could have predicted a year ago.
Nobody could have predicted a year ago that inflation would get this bad. Nobody? What about me? I have been warning people about inflation on this YouTube channel and in basic political and economic discussions with so many different people for not just a year, but for much longer than a year. I've been talking about this basically since round 1 of the stimmy checks, that the economic recovery that we've been seeing is not real. It's exactly that. Stimulus. Stimulated. It's fake. It's an illusion. And that eventually the chickens are going to come home to roost and inflation is going to get out of hand. I've been warning about this since way before the 2021 2 to 3% jump in inflation. And it's not just me. It's actually basically anybody with a fundamental understanding of money supply and basic economics. Many of my friends are finance majors. We've been talking about this for a very long time. Again, we've been taking it seriously, and Biden hasn't. Jen Psaki, Janet Yellen, Jerome Powell, the rest of them, all of these Democrat politicians who have been pushing for these massive trillion-dollar deals are all the ones to blame. And you know what? Even a little blame goes to Republicans and even Donald Trump for the initial round of stimmy checks. But like I always say, at least back then, we were in unprecedented times and people thought they were doing the right thing. Fast forward to 2021 and 2022, you are out of your mind, and the only thing that saved the American public from economic disaster, especially in relation to inflation, is Joe Manchin. The guy's a damn hero, but the left seems to think he's like the Joker from Batman. Complete irony. But this president is something else. The kicking the can down the road and ignoring concerns of the average American. The presidential candidate who said that he was going to be a president for all Americans. The presidential candidate who said that the buck stops with him and he will take responsibility instead of blaming others. Well, he kind of did that the other day.
Why do you believe so many Americans believe that your administration is not doing enough to combat inflation? And do you believe that you and your administration bear some measure of responsibility for the inflation that we're seeing across the country?
First is we're in power. That's the first thing. And you justifiably right, we control all three branches of the government.
Oh, it's his administration. But then immediately, Biden blames Ultra MAGA and Vladimir Putin for economic woes. I mean, complete, utter nonsense. Contradicting himself, showing that he's nothing but a dishonest, disingenuous liar. And this idea that it's Vladimir Putin's fault. Did the Russia-Ukraine conflict make gas a little bit more expensive, which made everything else a little bit more expensive? Sure. But is Vladimir Putin the one who injected trillions of new American dollars into the money supply? No, of course not. It's all just so frustrating. The lies, the dishonesty, this incoherent, babbling president, the incompetence, all of it, the corruption. It's just so frustrating. I wish I could just beam some common sense into the brains of the average individual, because once you see this stuff, folks, once you see what's really going on here, you cannot unsee it just how dishonest these people are. They are purposely making your life worse and then campaigning to fix it, but not actually presenting a plan to fix it at all. It's actually nuts. That's what I got for you guys though. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe. I'm gonna get back to work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.